guys, what is up? It's HVL Manga here, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. So today, it was about time I updated this video, because I made this video about a year ago, and wow, the list has changed. And obviously, as you can tell by today's title, I will be talking to you guys about my top 10 favorite manga that I have read. So without further ado, let's start in our number 10 spot, and then we're going to be going up, so 10 all the way up to 1. The manga in my number 10 spot is probably the one where people are like, why is this in your top 10? And I don't know why. So the manga series in my 10th favorite manga reads, I guess, is none other than Battle Royale. So let's talk about Battle Royale, because whenever I say that I really like the series, people are either like, yes, like, go girl, or the other side of it's like, why? Battle Royale follows a society where once a year, the government chooses a random class to participate in a Battle Royale game where all of the students fight until one of the students survives. I mean, pretty typical Battle Royale type story. What I really like about this series though, for a couple things. One, it was honestly one of the first Battle Royale type things out there, right? So now in today's, culture, media, whatever, Battle Royale is just kind of like a common thing. I mean, you got Fortnite, you got things like the Hunger Games, right? Everyone kind of pretty much knows what a Battle Royale type setting is. So it's really cool to consume a piece of media and content that kind of like coined it in a way, or kind of just like started this idea. So that's one thing that I really like about it. But let's just, before I go into more things I like about it to try and justify my point, let's just talk about the things that it maybe lacks. So Battle Royale, it isn't the most, well thought out, plot driven, character deep, really developing the themes and the characters and the story. It doesn't really do that. Even the English translation of Battle Royale is honestly kind of booty. Like, it's not the best piece of media to exist out there, okay? Comparing it to things like Berserk, I mean, you can't compare. But let's talk about why I like it. I like it because of that. I like that it's one of those series that you can kind of turn your mind off and just read and just kind of like, just get invested into the story without having to think too much. Sometimes I don't want to think. You know what I mean? I think all day. Sometimes when I want to read something, I don't want to think. So that does that really well. But also, it kind of is a guilty pleasure in the sense of it is just hyper violent, super grotesque, super dark. I mean, the things that these characters go through are things that no person ever should have to go through, besides even the Battle Royale aspect. People are dark and twisted and just like, how can you do that to the person? Like, it is a very, like, just kind of like mind-boggling, grotesque read. So, with all of that being said, would I recommend this to the average Joe? No. I think it takes a very specific person to enjoy this read. One, you have to be okay with, gruesome, hyper-violent things, but two, also, like, there's a lot of very sensitive, triggering topics that you need to be in the right headspace for, because if you're not, this might not be the series for you. The series is out of print. There are two variations. There are the singles and then the hardcovers. The singles, though out of print, are actually pretty easy to find. You might have to fork out a little bit more money than, a typical, standard manga volume, right? But if you can find a good deal on it, I highly recommend it for, again, a very specific older, mature audience. Okay, moving on to my number 9 spot. The series that is my 9th favorite manga series that I have read thus far is none other than Bokurano Hours. I honestly think this series is criminally underrated in the community. I don't think people read it enough. Maybe that's because it's out of print and people can't really find physical volumes super easily, but I love this read. So let's talk about it. So Bokurano Hours is kind of like this sci-fi mystery thriller action type read, and it follows our main group of characters, who are a group of kids who go out exploring one day, just doing the kid things as kids do, and they stumble upon this individual that gets them to sign a contract that basically they should have never signed and got them into a world of trouble. So this contract basically tells them that each of these kids have to pilot and direct this robot to fight another robot that's threatening Earth in order to save the Earth. And, I'm not gonna go any further than that, but what I really like about this series is, one, you really get to know the kids. You really start to get attached to these kids, and kind of their personalities, what they've gone through, their lives, their experiences. There's also a lot of twists and turns. I love a manga series that I can't predict. I feel like I've consumed so much media just in general that it is so easy, honestly, for me to predict what's going to happen in certain series, movies, you name it. Because I've consumed so much, I can kind of get a framework for how things are gonna lay out. This series came with twists and turns that I never expected, and I just really liked it. It is violent, it is gruesome, it is incredibly dark, and there are a lot of triggering topics that, again, you need to be kind of in the right mindset to work through and to read. I will say the series is, I believe, out of print, and the volumes are getting harder and harder to find. And on top of that, volume 3 in general has always been an absolute bear to collect. I was lucky enough to find a volume, but if you are looking to collect the series physically, do just be aware that it probably will be pretty difficult. But if you do decide to read it online, I ain't gonna tell nobody. It'll be our little secret. I just recommend it. Okay, so next, moving on to the number 8 spot in my top 10 favorite manga list. This isn't a controversial series. I think people in general do like it, but I think people tend to put this mangaka's other works before this one, and I don't have any of his other works on this list, so I don't know, controversy, maybe, I don't know. But the manga in my number 8 spot is none other than Pluto by Naoki Urasawa and Osamu Tezuka. So let's talk about Pluto, because I absolutely adore it. Number one, Urasawa and Tezuka are just, gods of the manga community, right? They are just very widely known and just widely respected, right? So let's talk about what Pluto is about. So Pluto is another take on the Astro Boy story, and whenever someone would say that, I would always be like, okay, great, I have no idea what Astro Boy is, so let me give you a little bit more context. So this story basically follows a society where robots and humans live together. However, there is some disparity between these two parties. Humans see themselves as the superior intellect, the superior being, and there's conflict obviously between them and the robots. However, even beyond that, there are these select group of robots in this society that are the best of the best. These are the most intellectual, just the best in a wide variety of things. These robots are the robots. They start to go missing, and they start to end up getting eradicated and wiped off from the earth. And it follows our main character, who's kind of this robot detective who is a part of that larger, specialized group of robots. He discovers the mystery of why are these robots dying, who's targeting these robots, and why. And what I really like about this read is, one, I love the mystery aspect. I think Urasawa is a master at mystery. Even in his other works like Monster and 20th Century Boys, he just does that part so well, and I love, again, not knowing how series are gonna happen. But what I also really like about this read is how fast-paced it is and how to the point it is. It is only 8 volumes long, which I really respect, because there are so many series out there that are like 500 volumes, and I'm like, girl, you think I have enough space on my shelf for another 20 long volume series, right? But again, it's also fast-paced. I love how from the first chapter, I'm like, okay, we're going. Like, things are immediately happening. Like, I'm immediately, like, into the series. I'm immediately hooked because it is so fast-paced. I think for me, sometimes with series, I really struggle when it is a slower beginning. Like, you just kind of gotta want it. I struggle with that sometimes because I just want to be hooked into the series. I just want that. And this series did that so unbelievably well, to the point where I couldn't like sit it down. I was literally in class, second semester, senior year of university, reading this series in class because I just needed to know what freaking happens, because I just was so absolutely invested. So this series, highly, highly recommend it. Incredible read, and with only 8 volumes that are all in stock right now, you can't really go wrong. Okay, so next, moving on in the list, the manga series in my number 7 spot is a series that, makes sense for a lot of people love it, is none other than JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 2 Battle Tendency. So let's talk about it, because I freaking adore Part 2. So JoJo's, when you talk about the series, you kind of have to break it up into parts, because obviously they are all so incredibly different. JoJo's Part 2. I think what I really like about this part is the characters. I think the characters really made this part. Specifically, I love Joseph. Joseph is my favorite JoJo currently, I've only read parts 1 through 3, so, you know, there's a lot of other parts to just, you know, discover and learn. But I love Joseph. I love his personality. I think he is just hilarious. And I love Caesar. Caesar is a great Joe bro, right? He's my favorite Joe bro that I've experienced also, and I love Joseph and Caesar's relationship, and just in the beginning when they absolutely hated each other to the end where it was just like so beautifully done seeing their relationship develop. And not only that, I also loved the villains. I think Cars was freaking so cool. The Pillarmen and the music from the anime, the Pillarmen theme. Oh, I'm like, every time that comes into my car, I'm just like full volume, having a great time. I just highly enjoyed the read. I was really invested, and again, I think it's because of the characters. The characters really made me invested and really enjoy that part of JoJo's. So part 2 is definitely my favorite part. Again, I do have to get into more parts. Part 3, a little lackluster. Don't sue me. But yeah, definitely Battle Tendency. I highly recommend it. If you got into JoJo's and part 1 wasn't your thing, just keep going because part 2, in my opinion, is incredible. Okay, so next moving on to my number 6 spot. This series is one that I actually read recently and I have been loving. And the manga series in my number 6 spot is none other than Gantz. Let's talk about Gantz because I have slept on Gantz for so long because of the stupid physical releases by Dark Horse. Ugh, I want the single so bad, but that's just not financially feasible right now. So Gantz basically follows our main character who is kind of saved from death. He basically like gets in front of a train, I believe, and is like dies, but like doesn't. I don't know, kind of weird. Regardless though, he is kind of saved from death. And he's saved from death and he's brought to this room and he quickly discovers that he needs to go out and fight a plethora of monsters. So he gets to this room, fights monsters. Does he win? Does he survive? Right? Come back to the real world, fight monsters. So it's kind of like this back and forth sort of thing. And the stakes are very high because if you die fighting these monsters, then you die also in your actual life. So it's actually, it's a really interesting kind of sci-fi, action-packed, gore, mystery type of read. There's a lot of mystery surrounding kind of like, who is this organization? Why is he saved? Like, what actually happened here? There's a lot of mystery to unfold, and what I really like about this read is a couple things. One, the artwork. Oh my gosh, some of the best artwork in my collection. It is absolutely stunning. But two, you don't know what the frick is going on, and I love it. I cannot predict what's going on in that read ever. Like, ever. I think it was like Omnibus 3 or 4, something really big happened, and I'm like, I literally sat there and I was like, are you sure that this just, like, did you mean to do this? Are you aware that this is what happened in your manga? Because I just was like, I did not expect it. It completely altered the course of the series for me. And it's just so wacky. And I love it. And it just absolutely, again, keeps you on your toes. You never know what's going to happen. And it's just crazy insanity, but so good. Okay, so we are finally moving into my top 5 favorite manga. So the manga in my number 5 spot is definitely the most different from anything else in this top 10 list. And that series is none other than My-san Ikoku. I know, crazy to think about that this made the list. So My-san Ikoku is a beautifully done slice of life rom-com adult series done by Rumiko Takahashi. I love Rumiko Takahashi, and this series really made me realize that. So My-san Ikoku follows our main character Godai, and he goes to live at, for lack of a better word, apartment type complex thing with a bunch of other people, and the manager of this building, he starts to fall in love with. He starts to really have feelings for, and it basically just follows them, their little dance, their little dramatic dance, and then a love L is introduced, and it's so different from stuff that I normally read, but I really like it about that. You know what I mean. I also really love how it's handled. I love some good drama and I love some good tea, but also it's held very respectfully, and the way that she writes it, the way that they interact with each other, I like that it's adults. I think Rumiko Takahashi does a fantastic job, and the series also has a beautifully done collector's edition done by Viz. Is it collector's edition? I don't even know, but they are beautifully done beautifully like feeling and looking books. There are 2 versions. There are the singles that were originally released, I don't know how long ago, but they are the new Viz versions. I love them. They're so great. So if you're looking to get into My Sunny Koku, now's the time. They're all in stock. You can find them really easily. And in those beautiful Viz editions, they're so good. Now is the time. Go get it because it's so good. Okay, so now moving into my top 4. So it's funny, my top 4 except for one, because I don't know what I want to get yet. I have tattoos all dedicated to this top 4. So you know what? Interpret that as you will. So the manga in my number 4 spot is actually Dragon Ball. I adore Dragon Ball. Let's talk about it, because Dragon Ball for the longest time, I didn't know if I was actually gonna like it. I didn't know if it was an actually good series or if it was one that just a lot of people have nostalgic value for. And while I think the nostalgic factor is there, it is just genuinely so enjoyable. And I'm speaking a little bit more into the original Dragon Ball versus Z. I've read maybe like 150 chapters of Z so far, but the original Dragon Ball, the reason why I liked it so much is because it brought me back to a place of like being like a child. I don't know how to completely articulate it, but I just felt like a child. I just felt so like childlike reading it, and not in like a bad way, in like a way that I was transported back to my youth. And I know that might not make a whole lot of sense, but I absolutely loved that. You know, being adult, having very adult responsibilities, work, all that sort of stuff, life can sometimes get hard and complicated, but this series really just made me feel young again. Not like that I'm old, but like made me feel like a kid again and made me feel very like at peace. And it was just a very enjoyable, very fun read. I hate how Dragon Ball, I think currently, is kind of overlooked by a lot of new readers, because it's like, it's kind of like this thing that exists for the older people in the community. Like, people grew up watching it, it's for them. No, it's absolutely for today, and I think it still absolutely holds up even with all of the other content that exists right now. I don't know, it made me feel like a kid again, and I absolutely loved that. Okay, so now we're in my top 3, which honestly, I really doubt my top 3 will ever change. It might, I don't know, but the manga series in my number 3 spot is Fullmetal Alchemist. Obviously, Fullmetal Alchemist is such a fantastic manga. I actually need to reread it. It's been a while since I've read it. What I really like about this series is, one, I love the world building. I think it's really cool. I just kind of love the uniqueness of it. The power system, alchemy is interesting. But 2, I think where it really shines is its characters. I love the characters. I love how they each have their own very distinct personalities. I think that's kind of cool. And I love the twist with the 7 deadly sins. There are characters in the series based on the 7 deadly sins, such as lust, greed, gluttony, etc. I think the villains are really cool, the characters are just really interesting, and I genuinely, when I tell you that I cried reading it, I'm not even kidding. I sobbed. It was like, I finished reading it and I cried. It was just that good. Again, it's one of those things that everyone tells you to read, but it's kind of like, oh, like I'll do it later, but I highly recommend you read it. There are several editions out of Fullmetal Alchemist that you could get into. There are the singles, the box set route if you want to go maybe the more cost-effective route. There are the Omnis, I believe, and then there are also the beautiful hardback Full Metal editions done by Viz that are recently more released. Highly recommend those. Definitely a higher price point, but they are stunning. So, highly recommend Full Metal. It's fantastic. Everyone knows it for a reason, and it is just genuinely great content. Okay, moving into the top 2, the manga series in my number 2 spot is Vinland Saga. Duh. So, Vinland Saga is, again, a series that I will always sing its praises. It is a series at a very, very high level bird's eye view about Vikings, follows our main character Thorfinn after a tragic event happened as a child, and it kind of transitions into him figuring out who he is as a person, as a warrior, going through very real, very like hard situations. I think Vinland Saga has one of the best prologue arcs in all of manga. I think it is incredibly done, and I almost just want to go back and like reread that part just for funsies, because it is just genuinely so good. What I really like about Vinland Saga is I just love seeing the character development of Thorfinn. It's just so interesting to see how this kid grew up, was absolutely broken, and just him transforming into who he is, I guess, today. The artwork's incredible, beautiful editions overall. I highly recommend if you haven't read Vinland Saga. It is one of the most acclaimed seinens out there for a reason. I mean, it is just a phenomenal read. And at my number 1 spot, with absolutely no surprise here, is none other than Berserk. We all know this. I feel like known for that at this point, for really liking Berserk. It's, I think, one of the highest rated series out there. It's one of the most well-known series out there. If you are a seinen enjoyer, you know about it, and even if you're not, you know about it. Berserk is an absolutely fantastic story. Again, following Guts, just a broken man figuring out who he is. I just love those kind of stories like that, because at the very front value, it's very dark, very gruesome, fighting monsters, all that sort of stuff. But you know, level under that, it's very deep, it's very emotional, it's very powerful to see this man who, you know, on the outside is, you know, just very gruff, big, brawny man, on the inside being very broken. And it's just an insane read. I highly recommend it. I mean, it's Berserk. Frickin' read it if you haven't. Definitely for an older audience, but definitely read it if you haven't. Okay guys, so that was my top 10 manga list for 2023. What do we think? Any hot takes, any good takes, any bad takes? Let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what your top 10 is. Do we share any? Do we have any common threads? Let me know in the comments down below. Guys, thank you again so much for watching today's video. I genuinely love all of the series that I mentioned, and I highly recommend them. So guys, love ya, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.